Mark here again, cooking books, bringing information. I've been studying alchemy. As you know, if you've been watching any of my videos, you know I've been studying alchemy, and the mission is to become alchemized. But as I mentioned before, part and parcel to alchemy is a generic or generalization in terms of understanding of a general understanding of the periodic table. It's part and parcel. You have to study the periodic table in order to truly understand alchemy, because the periodic table lets you. It's a generally it's a tabulation or an arrangement of all the elements, how it's a study of how they interact with each other, as well as their behavior based off that interaction with their environment. So if you understand how elements are tabulated or arranged in sequences of similarities and usually having same properties and structures. And if you understand that, for instance, if you understand the alky metals and what they are, what their properties are, and the alkaline metals, what their properties are, the halogens, what their properties are, then you'll be able to predict the properties of things that are considered metallurgic or alky metals. You'll know how they react with halogens, which are elements that are considered highly reactive. They're also considered, in the fact that they're highly reactive, and the alky metals are also reactive just as much as the halogens. So therefore, those two will combine and form ionic bonds or chemical bonds. So those two would bond. Whereas if you understand noble elements won't bond with alky or with halogens, they won't bond, because you'll understand that noble elements have sufficient valence electron shells, which means they're stable. They're happy elements. They're in a very good space, so they don't need to bond with anyone else or any other element. They're self-sufficient. They're independent. They're complete. And these other elements that aren't complete are the elements that are more prone or tend to bond with other elements. Therefore, they're highly reactive. Also, if you understand about halogens, their electronegativity, right? They're highly electronegative, meaning that they attract a lot of electrons. They have a very strong pull, right? Because of their high electronegativity. If you go back towards the first column, electronegativity decreases, and that being is that if you go towards the left as opposed to the right, you're going to start coming into, again, the alkeys. The alkeys are low electronegativity because they want to get rid of electrons. They want to throw off an electron so that they can become stabilized. And whereas the halogens, they want to take so that they can become stabilized. So understanding this, just a generic understanding of the periodic table, you'll understand how you as a person, how you'll interact, who you'll combine with, who you'll form stability with, and who you'll be reactive with. And these reactions, when we say chemicals are highly reactive, we mean in an inflammable, a violent, explosive kind of way. So these behaviors that are highly reactive, you'll know whether you and someone will combine and be able to have a noble relationship, or a highly reactive relationship where you guys would be like cats and dogs down each other's throats, trying to sabotage each other every step of the way, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. So because we are the periodic table are the constituent parts of what makes us. They're the constituent parts of what we're composed. So if you have a basic understanding of this, you'll understand your biology, right? Now, the periodic table doesn't at all indicate your frequency being or your spirit being. It does, however, shine light on your biological being, your biology, your anatomy, your anatomical structure and setup. And if you can understand that, And then you can bring the anatomical setup with your frequency being, which is your spirit being. You can have some kind of symbiotic or amalgamation where there's a harmonious relationship between your anatomical structure and your frequency spirit structure, and therefore you can have you can achieve optimal alchemization, right? You can have optimal achemical. You can have an optimal achemical process, alchemical process, right? Achemical or alchemical, however you want to say, tomato. But so it's important that we understand the periodic table. Also, studying the periodic table, you'll find out which chemicals or which elements are natural and which chemicals aren't natural, right? So you'll know, and again, understanding the periodic table or studying this periodic table is really going to teach you about yourself. Like I said, your anatomical self, your chemical reactions. Remember, chemical reactions, right? If you learn about like the alky metals, why are they called alky metals? Because these alkaline metals are they're whatchamacallit. They're the electrolytes that's in our bodies, right? For instance, sodium, magnesium, potassium, calcium. These are they're in their purest form. They're metals. They're soft metals. Metals in its purest form, it's soft. I know you think of metal naturally, it's a hard iron, but no. In its pure elemental state, it's a soft metal, and they're extremely conductivity. They have high conductivity and serve as electrolytes in our physical bodies. So if we understand that, you'll know how to actually, aside from just dieting, right? Because dieting, you can get that's how you get your electrolytes, right? But you'll know in terms of a frequency how to channel energy through your body, how to block energy, right? Because you'll understand that you're magnetized, right? You are naturally a magnetized. Your cells serves as magnets, right? Because these electrolytes exist in your cells, and you're therefore a natural magnet. This is why when people talk about you attract things to yourself, you literally do. And when people talk about the laws of attraction, this is the science behind it, because your cells have what's called electrolytes, which are metallic or metallurgic or alloys. If you go to the again, this is why it's important to study the periodic table. These are considered alloys, mixtures of various metals or one or two or more metals. So it's metallurgic, and therefore electronegativity, as I mentioned before, is the capacity of an element to attract, to draw other similar elements or electrons, which are negative particles, to itself. Fluorine has the highest source of electronegativity. We consume a tremendous amount of water. 65 to 70% of our makeup is hydrogen, right? And we know that hydrogen is H2O, right? So you have oxygen atoms with hydrogen atoms, and you have H2O. But the interesting thing is oxygen makes up 65% of the components that you're made up of, right? So you're made up of oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, phosphorus, and sulfur, right? And of those, 65% of that is the oxygen. So yeah, oxygen is also highly electronegative, like fluorine. And so naturally you're going to draw things to yourself because they have a high electronegativity. And again, it's important to understand what electronegativity is. And this is where the periodic table will let you know, based off the location of elements on the periodic table, you'll know that you can predict their behavior. You can put it like this: you can't predict it to a T because there's the laws of butterfly effect, there's chaos theory, but you can make it's a generalization. You can make broad generalizations based off a good understanding of the periodic table. I have some notes here. Let me see something real quick. Right, you can make certain generalizations can be made, right? Certain generalizations can be made when you know how elements behave beforehand. So studying the periodic table, tying it in or amalgamating or synchronizing with alchemy, you can know how certain behaviors, so you can make certain generalizations. Certain generalizations can be made about behaviors of individuals. So when people say don't prejudge, well, it's kind of true and it's not true. You shouldn't prejudge, but if you have this insight, and if you've studied the periodic table, if you understand the elements, just some basic comprehension of how these things work, you can make certain generalizations and be safely assuming them to be correct, right? Because if you understand the periodic table, based off the location and position of certain elements, you can predict that this element will behave this way and interact in such a way with an environment because of its constituent properties. And those properties might be the atomic number, the atomic mass, weight. Every element has a different atomic number, different mass, different weight. So if you understand what these properties are made of, some of the properties, I got some notes here. Atomic radius, which is the distance from the center of the nucleus to the surrounding area. Also the electron affinity, the metallurgic properties, right? Whether it's metallic or not, the electronegativity is what we talked about, and ionization energy, which is the ability to ionize another atom, right? So these are, so if you understand what the properties are of elements, you can predict the behavior. So if I understand, if I'm around you long enough and I could see what you're made of, the ingredients that's within you, I already could tell what you're going to do in certain given situations, right? And it's not facts. It's not, the accuracy is not 100%, but the certain generalizations and assumptions are pretty. You can take that. You can live with that. And what I mean by that, I might predict that you're going to do this way, and I might predict that you're going to react a certain way, or you're going to go to the store, you're going to do something, you're going to buy this, you're going to do that. But I can't predict what you're going to be wearing when you go to that store. I might say, okay, this person's going to go to the store and they're going to buy this kind of food, or they're going to buy this kind of furniture, or something. I'm just throwing anything silly out there. What I can predict is that, okay, you're going to be wearing this shirt on the way to the store. The shirt that you're wearing is going to be red. The socks that you're wearing is going to be black. Okay, on the way to the store, you're going to run into this old friend, right? And you're going to stop and spend 5 minutes talking to this old friend. So you can't predict all of that. That's where chaos theory comes in and butterfly effect, right? If you understand these things, but you can make some generalizations or some general assumptions based off, if I know the elements or the structure of this person's psychology or their disposition, what they're going to do. Politicians do it all the time. Our policymakers, our legislators, our lawmakers, our people who are in power that governs us, they do it all the time. They have what's called think tanks, where they get together, they bring some of the most brilliant minds, brilliant scientists, and they literally study the demographics, which is the makeup of their constituents, and they study their behavior habits, their patterns. Remember, the periodic table is about patterns. When Dmitri Mendeleev in 1850 whatever, in the 1800s, when he put together or tabulated or structured the elements, he recognized that there were patterns. There were patterns in the elements, that repeated patterns, repeated characteristics, and repeated behaviors. And this is why he was able to put it together. So there are patterns in our behavior. There's patterns in humanity. There's patterns in society. There's patterns in demographics. There's patterns in our geographical structure. So, if you study the periodic table, you'll learn a lot about yourself, right? Till next time, y'all know what I'm going to be doing: cooking books, bringing information. Let the alchemy begin. Let the alchemist continue his search and his endeavorments to become the best version of himself. One more thing before I go. Remember allotropes, right? Allotropes are different versions of the same element. Quick example: carbon exists as both graphite, triad actually. It's not both. It's triad. It exists as graphite. It can exist as diamond, and it can exist as charcoal. What determines the state it exists in is the arrangement of its atomical structure. Really quick. So Keep that in mind, that car diamond, carbon, no, diamond, charcoal, graphite are all the same basic element, which is carbon. Kind of like how water can be solid, can be liquid, and it can be gas. So you're one element, you're a human being, you're a person, but you can exist as different versions of yourself. That's what the ultimate goal of the alchemist is, to become the best, better version, better, best, superlative of himself or herself. Till next time, peace.